So tell me what you've been hearing from renters.
Yeah, so exactly like you said, people are really struggling with the market right now. So let's use Courtney Townsend as an example. She is a single mom who lives here in Calgary of 2 boys. And we actually spoke with her back in December when she had just gotten a $900 rental subsidy. And that really gave her a lot of relief. She was able to stay in her home, close to her kids' schools, close to her parents. But fast forward a few months, we heard from her again in March when she got the news that that subsidy would essentially be wiped out. Her landlord told her that he's raising her rent by $800 for a small bungalow in Lakeview, and she was shocked. So she looked around for cheaper rentals elsewhere and in other neighborhoods. And it's just hard right now. Like you said, you know, the vacancy rate is the lowest it's been in nearly a decade. And ultimately, she decided to renew her lease. So she's thinking of either picking up a 4th part-time job or finding a roommate.
Holy smokes, you got to feel for her.
Yeah.
So the rental situation has some rental advocates calling for rent control. What would that do to the market, Karina?
Yeah, so I mean, there is some debate among those advocates and some economists. So let's take Moshe Lander. He is an economist at Concordia University who lives in Alberta. And he says, you know, rent control is a short-term solution, but it can cause longer-term problems. Because what it does is it discourages investments to actually build more housing, which is clearly what we need with the vacancy rate right now.
And just to be clear, when we talk rent control, we're talking capping the rate of rent,
exactly,
right?
Exactly. That's
okay.
exactly what it is. So yeah, here's what Moshe has to say about that.
I feel absolutely awful for this particular person. The easiest way to make a whole bunch of other people feel the same pain and suffering is to have rent control. And so that is the worst possible solution. But in the moment, in the narrow self-interest of the person who's making the suggestion, I could understand why they would say it, but it is absolutely devastating to any city that implements it. And what seems like a temporary problem for a few will become a permanent problem for a lot.
Now, some other economists that I spoke to say that subsidies are a better option, they're more effective. But I spoke with Sasha Senkova at the University of Calgary. She's a professor of planning. And what she said is subsidies actually have an inherent risk. Here's what she had to say.
What it does, it's automatically triggering an increase in the rents because more people with more money, whether it's their own savings or family intergenerational transfer or a subsidy from the government chasing the same commodity that is in short supply. So it's as simple as that, really, and yet extremely complex.
Yeah, so for Sasha, the key here is really for governments to understand the complexity of the situation and also somehow find a way to balance those policies like rent control, like social assistance, while also pushing to build more housing.
I don't know if you've heard, but we're in the middle of an election campaign right now.
I have heard something about that.
Have you heard anything from the front runners on this issue?
Yeah, so I reached out to the 6 main parties. The UCP declined my request for an interview, but they did point me to a news conference that happened on March 22nd. And basically their stance on this all is they're opposed to rent control. So they point to other things like subsidies, specifically their rent supplement program, and also building more government subsidized housing.
How about the NDP?
So the NDP, on the other hand, is they're kind of more open to having discussions about rent control. That is what they say. If they're elected, they're open to having those discussions. And they want to make sure that everyone who's impacted by the conversation is part of that discussion. So people like renters, like landlords, like policy experts, but like the UCP, they also point to subsidies. They want to bring more subsidies to people, and they also want to build more government subsidized housing.
So is any party in favor of this idea of rent control?
Yeah, the Green Party of Alberta is the only party that is proposing rent control. They want to implement a 1.5% cap on those rent increases. And among those other smaller parties, no one is really talking about it as much, except for maybe the Alberta Liberal Party. They say that, you know, they could implement rent control in limited and short-term ways.
If they form government, which
if they're elected, yeah.
Karina, thanks for this.
Thank you.